Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Depends on where you might be. This is Frederick Winsness with NetHope, and I want to welcome everyone to another NetHope Solutions Center webinar. Today we're talking conservation, and we're talking about impact-focused coalitions, advanced management of real-time operations. And we have Wildlife Conservation Society and Vulcan today is going to have very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. Before we get started, I just want to go over general housekeeping. We want to make this interactive, and to do that, we'd like you to open up the Q&A or the chat window to post your questions there. We will hold the questions towards the end of the hour and reserve 15 minutes or so to do a Q&A session. We are recording this today, and the recording, along with the slides being presented, will be posted to the NetHope Solutions Center, and there'll be a follow-up email that will be sent out to you to point you in the right direction. And you should feel free to share that with colleagues and others that might find this content of interest. And at the very end, when we close down the webinar, you will see a little webinar satisfaction poll popping up in your web browser. And if you wouldn't mind taking a couple minutes to answer those questions, that would be very, very helpful. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Jonathan Palmer. He is the Executive Director, Office of Strategic Technology at Wildlife Conservation Society, and a good friend of NetHope's. And Jonathan, let me turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Frederick. And it's my pleasure to be introducing today Shana Tulsher, who's the Senior Business Development Manager in the Impact team at Vulcan, and a great friend of mine, Ted Smith, who is the Principal Business Development Manager at Vulcan for EarthRanger, and who has led, EarthRanger since its inception many years ago. So, as I say, this talk is mainly going to be led by Ted and Shana, and they'll introduce themselves in a minute. I'm just going to give a brief introduction. Frederick, next slide.
Well, I gave you control. I'm sorry.
Okay, marvelous. Okay. So I've got a bit of basic learning to do. Where am I hitting to advance the slides?
On the left-hand side. Let me take control back. It's okay.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to go next slide? So before we get into the discussion of EarthRanger, maybe just to give a little bit of a kind of prelude and talk about the kind of title of this slide, which is around impact-focused coalitions. So EarthRanger is one of a number of initiatives in the conservation sector where 5, 10, or even more conservation organizations have got together and produced technology that has not just delivered for an individual project or an organization, but scaled globally across all of the organizations. Some of those initiatives have been led by individual NGOs like Global Forest Watch. Some have been partnerships with equal partners all the way. Some, like EarthRanger, have actually been led by one organization, but all of them have shared this common approach of bringing the whole community together and creating a solution that is focused not on the needs of, again, one individual site or one individual organization, but to try and use digital technology, digital transformation to address one of the biggest challenges of the day. And EarthRanger, as we'll see, this is addressing the challenge that not only my organization and my peer NGOs have, but many governments around the world have, which is managing real-time operations in protected areas. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And I think over to you, Ted and Shana. Do you want to introduce yourself and take it from here?
Sure. Shauna, why don't I let you introduce yourself first, and then I can jump in and go from there.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, if it's morning your time. I'm Shauna Tischler. I'm a Senior Business Development Manager. I'm on the EarthRanger team. I've spent considerable time in Africa working on anti-poaching, anti-trafficking, and on EarthRanger, I'm working especially on new landscapes and new species we can protect, especially outside of Africa. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you today.
Thanks, Shauna. And I'm Ted Schmidt, and I've been at Vulcan for, oh my goodness, 11 years now, actually as of June 2nd. And for the last, so I was working across a range of philanthropic areas, but for the last 5 years now, I've worked 5 years plus. I've been working strictly in wildlife conservation, primarily in Africa. And as Jonathan mentioned, was really part of the inception of EarthRanger. I think it embodies I guess I was going to launch right into EarthRanger. Let's see, just briefly about myself before. I was a program officer at the National Academy of Sciences before I came to Vulcan, looking at a range of policy issues around the application of science and technology, barriers to adoption for technology, and before that I was actually an engineer. So I have a mixture of engineering, policy, and actually I also have a degree in language, in German, of all things. And so I think the technology for conservation is a very classic example of challenges for adoption to technology. And I think what's really important to say there is that these coalitions, as Jonathan mentioned briefly, are absolutely critical to overcoming those adoption barriers. If you want to think of it that way, if you think in sort of economic terms, there's a real market failure. And so it really takes building coalitions of like-minded, mission-driven folks to be able to successfully drive technology adoption. And then looking specifically at EarthRanger, it is really an example where we went out, Vulcan went out as an organization, myself and my colleague Kathleen Gobush went out 5+ years ago now, and actually went and talked to everyone. We talked to folks at SMART. We talked to a number of the protected area management leading organizations. And a common theme when we said, what's your highest priority? They talked about having SMART, and that it was the first thing that really drove data-driven management and protected areas, which was, for most other sectors had long since happened, but hadn't really happened for conservation. So a real breakthrough there. What they needed now, though, was the real-time application and actually to be able to bring those two things together. And that's how EarthRanger was born. It was called DAS until last year, and so many of you may have heard it called DAS for Domain Awareness System. And we kicked it off, Jonathan, if you remember, it was August of 2015 in Seattle, and Jonathan was present at that meeting along with some of the leading protected area management organizations like African Parks, Lewa Conservancy, WCS had representatives there as well. And so right from the beginning, it was really a coalition, and we really think of it as, even though Vulcan did all of the actual coding and development of the product, we really think of it as being built by a coalition of conservation organizations. Everything that's in EarthRanger, and you can see on the screen here is a screenshot of one of the screens from EarthRanger. Everything that's on there, how it's visualized, how that feed is shown on the right, what we've integrated and how we've done that, and I won't read that list of things on the left there, but those are some of the key things that we've built into the system. All of those things were really specified by and refined by our partners, and I actually, over the last 5 years, have spent about 3 months every year for the last 5 years going out and meeting people, understanding the needs and driving that. We've had our engineers out sitting down with folks in the field and understanding how they're actually using the system, what they're doing there, and iteratively refining what we're doing. And we've had every year since that initial kickoff, we've had what we've now come to call a user conference. And interestingly, it's not just about the product, it's actually about building common best practices across these organizations. It's turned into a forum for these organizations to get together and share best practices, share successes and failures, and learn from each other. And in fact, I'd say that's one of the biggest impacts that this software product has had, is actually getting people together to be able to share best practices. I'm sure Jonathan would say similar things have happened with the SMART partnership, and when they bring folks together and share best practices. And I think that also goes to this coalition building, to working as a partnership, whether one organization is writing the code or multiple organizations. I think it's been, at least for EarthRanger, it's been absolutely critical that that's happened. Just briefly to talk a little bit about what EarthRanger does and is, it really focuses on real-time visualization, what's going on in the park. In the military world, I guess they would call it command and control, but it's really it's a protected area management system, similar to SMART in that way, but also very complementary. SMART, and now SMART Connect, are collecting data and observations from folks going out in the field and seeing what's going on, collecting quite detailed information in some cases. EarthRanger is focused more on the tactical, operational aspects. What's going on right now, what just went on, what's just about to go on, incident management, where are my assets that I'm trying to protect, where are the assets, i.e. the rangers that are trying to do the protecting, and as much as possible, where are we seeing, problems? Where are we seeing incursions? Where are we seeing, illegal livestock grazing? Where are we seeing bad things going on? And then having an operational picture of how to manage that. And that's what that over on the right is really a live feed, almost like a Twitter feed of things going on over the last minutes, hours, and days in some cases. And there's a map view. I don't think the next slide shows a map view. I think we've just got this one screenshot. But there are other screens. There are satellite views, so you can zoom in quite as detailed maps, satellite views as are available, and you can zoom in on things. There are tools for managers that are trying to figure out, my rangers are 1.1 kilometer from that elephant or from where we've heard a gunshot. So there are tools to do that kind of measuring so that the operations manager can safely position the rangers to take action, and it's all related to that. One of the coalition things will be that we're actively working on. In fact, I think we have a call later today, Jonathan. Is that we are working with the SMART partnership to be able to integrate and share data between SMART, SMART Connect, and EarthRanger. We want to make sure that the folks who have EarthRanger can leverage the analytic power that is in SMART. So we want to be able to bring some of the data that's collected in EarthRanger over to SMART so that it can be integrated or can be used along with the data that's collected in SMART to be analyzed and incorporated into those analytic tools that SMART has. And then conversely, we want to be able to bring the data that's collected in SMART about what's going on, like where snares have been collected, where poacher camps have been seen, whatever it might be that's been collected in SMART, to bring that information probably mapped, put into a map layer and overlaid onto the EarthRanger screen so they can help inform the real-time operations. Where are their hotspots? Where have things been happening? so that data can help inform those real-time operations. And so we're actively working with the Smart Partnership to do that. And then another aspect of this, and I'm forgetting what is the next slide because I don't know how long I'm talking on this slide. Yeah, okay, let's go back because let's go back to the previous one. Thank you. I don't remember it now. The other thing that I think is really critical in terms of coalition building, and again going back to sort of the market failure and the fact that you're not trying to capture some sort of market here, you're really trying to work together towards a mission, is we see the Smart Partnership as absolutely critical to being able to bring EarthRanger to places that we can't possibly go. And this is something that Sean is working actively with Cronin and the other folks in the Smart Partnership to really leverage the global footprint of all the Smart partners to be able to bring this tool along with Smart to protected areas in places that we can't go. We really focused on building the tool with some highly capable protected area managers because it's really hard to build software, and we wanted capable protected area managers that could iterate with us and do that work with us. And then once we've got it to a maturity level, which we pretty much do at this point, we need to engage others. We've engaged a couple of the Smart partners already, Wildlife Protection Solutions. We've also engaged some of the folks who bring other sorts of hardware technology to the field. And in fact, that's another aspect I wanted to talk about is there are obviously EarthRanger is only as good as the data coming into it. That data is coming from sensors via networks. So we've been working with folks that are starting to bring Internet of Things networking technology like LoRa, Sigfox, and others into conservation, building sensors, gate detection sensors, movement sensors. There are folks doing great work on camera traps like Panthera, TrailGuard. There are some other ones. And really all the folks trying to build hardware. And I think if you think of it in terms of coalitions, this is the biggest coalition, really what I've called a protected area data ecosystem, borrowing the term from the biologists. It's really, we need the hardware out there to be able to generate the data. It has to get transmitted to somewhere that it can be acted on. It has to be collected, and then it all has to be stored, coalesced, visualized, and analyzed. And there are pieces of all of those things that different people have strengths that they can contribute to. But to do that, we all have to work together in partnership. And that's been, I think, and to me, and Jonathan, I don't know about you, but to me that's been maybe the funnest part of this journey over the last 5 years is all of those, none of those coalitions, none of those partnerships really existed very much. There were little pieces here and there, but a group of us have been pulling those together. And so you've got hardware folks, you've got software developers, you've got networking companies, you've got funders, and you've got folks who can actually have a footprint on the ground and can actually deploy and train and support. All of those elements have to come together to make Smart work, to make EarthRanger work, and really to make protected area the application of technology to protected area management work. And I can't, it just would simply be impossible without a coalition of folks. And I'll just say, as Jonathan knows all too well, that's not been easy. There have been challenges. There are, to be blunt, there are egos. There are people with different priorities, and I think it's really the critical aspect of having good partners in the coalition is that they have to be first and foremost mission driven for conservation. In our case, in the broader NetHope scope of the world, whatever that mission is, you have to be driven for that mission, not for the press release, not for commerce, not for profit, not for all of these things. And if you're not mission focused, you're not going to ultimately be a good partner. You may be a vendor of technology that people's funders manage to get enough money together to purchase, but that's an arm's length relationship, and you really have to be mission driven. And I'll go on from there. I want to hit let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I just wanted to mention Vulcan is a unique place, and of course our founder Paul Allen passed away last October, so we're going through an understandable and expected transition, but we have a definite and I think will be a lasting commitment to those big areas of philanthropy. That Paul focused on, wildlife conservation being one of those. The pandemics, as I'm sure many of you know, Ebola was a huge focus for Paul, but more broadly, pandemics generally. And then ocean health, we have a huge coral program going on now, illegal fishing program, and other aspects of ocean health. And those are huge areas. And then climate research also and is another focus area for us. So we will continue to focus and grow on those in those areas. Paul did the giving pledge and made a real commitment as part of his legacy to philanthropy. And Vulcan is an interesting thing because we have engineers on staff who can step in and build when there's a gap and step in and build the technology that's needed. That's not our default. We do look for others who are building technology. The Smart is a great example of that on wildlife trafficking and intelligence gathering. There are some great tools out there. There was no reason for us to build that, and so we're always looking for tools and folks and organizations that we can fund that will be good mission-focused partners, and then where there are gaps or where we think we can do something quickly and get a solution out there, we will go and do those things. And I think that's all I really wanted to say on that. I think the important thing I wanted to share is that we will continue and in fact I think grow the philanthropic legacy that Paul started, and go from there. Let me go to the next slide. Great. And I didn't really put the full context, but the first big project that we did in conservation was started in 2014, and that was the Great Elephant Census. And we flew 20 countries. WCS was one of our partners. I believe there were 7 NGOs that we coordinated with, 20 scientists, and 70 or 80 crews of folks that flew 20 different countries in Africa. We played the role of project management. We did develop some technology there. We developed a database. It was the first database to put all of this raw data from a big census like this into one place. We did a little project called a flight logger to help collect the data more quickly. That was a couple of our engineers did that in 2 months. And one of those really, if you're an engineer, really fun projects. That led Paul to ask us, okay, we're counting them. That will help inform things like CITES. What can we do to help save them? And I did tell a little bit about how we went about asking protected area managers what they needed, what would help. And that led to EarthRanger and the launch I mentioned. And on the right there, you can see the results from the Great Elephant Census. That was one very important bit of data showing where poaching hotspots were. You can see southern Tanzania and northern Mozambique as a hotspot. We also funded scientific research. We funded, some of you may know, Dr. Sam Wasser, who's done some groundbreaking work in DNA analysis to understand where ivory originated from, where those elephants lived. The results of the research that he did there that we funded also corroborated what we saw in the great elephant census. So we do grants and funding as well as development, and that great elephant census really launched us into this conservation path, and now we have a whole program on illegal wildlife trafficking and supporting NGOs in the field there through grants and so on. We have the EarthRanger program. Shauna may mention that we have some other things on the demand side, some technologies that we're working on there, and then, as I said, working with SMART and others. Let's see, what's the next slide? Right. So what I wanted to, what I think I wanted to say here is, and I've touched on a bit of this along the way, but EarthRanger is the embodiment of coalition building and coalition driven technology for wildlife conservation. It is a collaboration of a whole lot of people, starting with the folks on the left and the SMART partnership, and you can see and Save the Elephants, who had a system that tracked animals, particularly elephants, obviously, but animals generally. Many of the concepts that have been built into EarthRanger came from that animal tracking system they had. Expanding beyond that and bringing in the security aspects that folks like African Parks, LEWA, NRT, and then informing it, with the data and the tools that the SMART partnership has built. All of the folks there on the founding partnership were part of a kickoff meeting, and as I said, we really felt like they were co-developers in the sense of they were very much guiding the development and of the system, what features were included, how it looked, how it felt, all of those things, even if we were actually writing all of the code. And then I've touched on some of these other things. Seems like we've got deployment partner as a header twice there, but then the next set is actually technology partners. Is deployment partners. And here we didn't have SMART in this column, but actually they will become the most important deployment partner because it is a group of 10 NGOs. But we've been working with folks who have put other technology out in the field. We'll probably be adding to those deployment partners. It's people who have a footprint on the ground. We have a very small footprint and a small number of people that can get out in the field. We are not doing too many deployments on our own. We did with those initial founding partners, but now we're going to be moving more away from that and really relying on the organizations that have a footprint on the ground to be able to be able to deploy our technology, integrate it with technology they bring, like SMART, like the hardware, and so on. And then on the next column should say deployment, or should say technology partners. It's deployment partners again. That column is another great example where we've worked with everyone from what I would almost call makers, and I think all the way, we haven't quite yet, but I'm going to get Al Davies in here yet with AudioMod, and all the way from folks doing building a $50 Smart Parks was a couple of folks that started, very passionate folks from the Netherlands that built some technology and now are growing that, all the way to Cisco, Esri, and Microsoft. Microsoft, for instance, has provided all the cloud hosting support for all the data that goes into EarthRanger. They've provided funding and support for that. So they're providing that Azure cloud hosting platform. So I think that range of technology partners that we really need to make EarthRanger worthwhile it's a huge range, and it's really been incredible to work with all of these organizations from really huge like Microsoft to really small organizations like Smart Parks. And then And then I wanted to mention a couple of the early customers beyond the founding partners who've also really helped shape Frankfurt Zoological, of course, being one of the smart partners and really helping us understand some of the requirements to get SMART and EarthRanger working together. And they've been really pivotal sort of beyond that first group of partners. And then Grumeti Reserve in Tanzania has been a tremendous partner. And I want to touch on that one a little bit, not so much about Grumeti itself, but about learning about the type of the type of skills that you need. One of the things that Grumeti has shown us, Frankfurt, African Parks, WCS, is that when you bring technology to a place, there's also a need to sometimes bring wholly new skill sets to the mission in the field. That doesn't mean they need to sit and write Java or Python or something, but they need to know more than just how to click through a web page. They need to understand if something gets a little stuck, how do they refresh, how do they reboot, how do they think analytically through using the technology in more and more sophisticated ways. And over the course of 5 years, and I'm sure that Jonathan, that you and the smart partners have seen this as well, there's this potential, and I think this is one of the profound things with technology, there's a potential to expose some of these folks in the field, some of the local folks who maybe have gotten that job in the operations room or gotten the job collecting data that's a promotion for them, say, from other things they've done, for them to have an opportunity to be exposed to and build skills, technology skills, doing these jobs. And I think that's also been a really important thing that has happened as we've taken this journey with EarthRanger and understanding and thinking through how do we get those skills in the field, with the available resources. So that's been really exciting.
And the person Ted is referring to is a woman, and so a woman in tech, I think that's a really impactful
That's true.
thing.
Yes.
That she's helping the community.
She's a local Tanzanian, and she's really embedded in the community. Alina's her name. She's fantastic, and we could point to some of the other places we've gone, and some of the other amazing folks that have really grown in their roles, and brought technology, built new skills through using the technology, and that's something we maybe should have anticipated but didn't, but has been a really fun part of the journey. That, and as I said, being able to share best practice, helping some of the organizations in the field be able to share best practices and be a convener and a forum for doing that. And I think that was another thing we didn't really foresee that, and yet that has been one of the biggest impacts. And then let's go to the next slide. I think, is this my last slide? Yeah. So what I'll leave before I hand it over to Shauna is that I think we have a success with EarthRanger. We're very excited about it. 15 sites in Africa, 56,000 square kilometers. That sounds a little low to me, but still a very large area. There's some numbers there. But we're in, and I don't know how many countries that is. It's got to be 8 or 9 countries if we added it up. But we started with 3 or 4 sites, and we've grown from there, and now we're getting lots of requests. And in fact, the next challenge we're really facing is being able to expand EarthRanger to all the places that it could be helpful and useful. And this is where those coalitions are going to be even more important than ever. Being able to, I can't go to every single place. Shauna can't go to every single place. We can't send someone to do on-site training everywhere. We need to be able to train the trainers. We need to be able to build a coalition of folks who can, maybe without ever having interacted with anyone specifically on the team, can go and deploy EarthRanger. And there we've really been looking at SMART as a model for how to do that. And also, of course, eventually leveraging the SMART partnership to be able to do that. But we're thrilled that we've gone past those 3 or 4 sites, and we've really gone past the sort of, is this useful, to, yes, it's useful, now how do we get it everywhere we want to go? And we're just very excited to have made it this far, and to work and put technology in these really, really challenging places where there is no money, there is no infrastructure, and there's very little capacity. And we'll go from there. Thank you.
Next slide.
Yeah, next slide, and I think we'll move over to Shauna. Is there a on-the-ground training capacity building needs?
That's a question.
Oh, that's a question. Okay, so we're just collecting questions. Okay.
So as Ted was saying, we've had a lot of learnings from our on-the-ground experiences in Africa, and all the time we've spent there and trying to really understand the use cases there. And now we want to go beyond Africa and try to protect as many species and new landscapes as we can. And whether it's through the SMART partnership or through just reaching out to other organizations, getting feedback from different coalitions that are out there and working in these areas, we're really excited about expanding beyond. Saying at its core, EarthRanger is a visualization tool. Whether your information is something that's on pen and paper that was written up a week ago and you brought it from deep in the rainforest back to wherever your headquarters are, and now you want to put it into your EarthRanger system, that's fine. EarthRanger can also just be a compilation of all of your reports and all of your information in an organized way, so you can start to understand those trends and changes over time. And so it might be that for certain landscapes, because they don't have collars and they don't have real-time sensors of any sort. They don't even have maybe connectivity in a protected area. And I say protected area very loosely because, having spoken to some areas in Asia especially, those areas have humans living in what should be a protected area. So, and that's where we get into human-wildlife conflict. And my next slide is going to get into that. But deforestation, especially as we look to Latin America and Asia, is going to be a really critical piece to this. And whether it's through acoustic sensors like audio moth or just GLAD alerts, things like that, where there's some sort of way to detect where forests have been cleared, or just roads, understanding where the roads are, so that will help you understand where the illegal logging is occurring. That's a really critical piece to solving for deforestation and thereby protecting species. And there's no picture of birds on here, but I just want to point out that we can also protect things like birds. You can put sensors on birds, but you can also, a lot of the bird species kind of get neglected and overlooked. So I just want to add that in there. Next slide. So human-wildlife conflict, we already are working on this in Africa, clearly. And our experience in Africa is that a lot of times the humans just really don't have an incentive to protect the wildlife when the wildlife are destroying their livelihoods, right? And then the wildlife, through EarthRanger and other tools like that, we can try to protect the wildlife by using geofences and things like that. But at the end of the day, technology will kind of only get us so far. Really, we need to build those coalitions, like Jonathan was saying, engage the communities, understand what their real needs are, understand how do they approach human-wildlife conflict. What do they do when they see that same lion who's been hanging around the boma? Or what do they do when, the elephant is raiding their crops again, right? And so we can, we need to really understand what their issues are, and that only comes from community engagement. And the outcomes so far, at least in Africa, have been really positive. It seems to have had a long-lasting impact in certain areas, and we really understand kind of the patterns and trends of the perpetual crop raiders, like I was saying, but more can be done for sure in Africa, and understanding what the needs are in Asia and Latin America will be especially helpful to us. And next slide. So the importance of people, which is kind of what I was getting to, is really critical, and it's a really critical piece to solving this puzzle here. Humans are, whether it's even in the U.S. with cattle, for instance, right, or it's in developing countries, humans are a really critical piece to this. And if we don't understand what the human conditions are like, whether safety, security, health, education, continuous natural disasters are occurring, if we don't understand what those problems are, it's really hard to get beyond conservation and understanding how we can help the humans too at the same time. And so technologies like EarthRanger, a kind of domain awareness system, I think are really important to understanding what the human element of this is, really getting at what the humans are facing and what they need to monitor will help us get kind of beyond conservation into other areas that are more along the lines of what NetHope works on. Next slide. And so what can you do? So the participants who are on this call, I think really informing us first and foremost of a situation where there's human-wildlife conflict, or you have this particular species that you really need to protect and it's getting poached out, or you just have severe deforestation, and a system like this could be really helpful. And maybe you're using SMART, for instance, and you think SMART with a visualization tool like EarthRanger could be really helpful to you. So contact us. I think that's the first step. And then the second one would be introduce us to others who can help us build out this community. So other experts, other people who can provide value added in different ways, whether it's through technology, expertise, other kinds of subject matter expertise would be really helpful to us. And I think we can also contribute further if we know what's going on out there. And then I think it's Jonathan next.
Yeah. Was this you or is this Jonathan? I just wanted to mention, I realized that Shauna, the call to action was contact us, and we didn't put our emails up there, but it's really easy. It's tedS@vulcan.com and ShaunaT@vulcan.com. So
I placed your email addresses in the chat window also.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. So, I think before we round out the questions and answers, let's understanding we have both conservationists and people from the broader NGO community. Let's talk about a few of the implications here. I think, one on the EarthRanger tech, and hopefully you got a picture from that first slide that showed not only is this about collecting in lots of really powerful data from the field, but it's about running some really kind of powerful algorithms behind that to figure out when you have an issue. It's the geofencing, the immobilization alert, figuring out when an animal or a vehicle or a person, is not behaving the way you expect, and using that as an indicator to respond, together with all the live alerts you get from the people in the field. So I think for the NGO people here, while EarthRanger is focused on the conservation community, I think everyone should be encouraged to think about how that technology applies to its sector, whether it's managing a refugee camp or dealing with emergency response, or just keeping your people safe in the field around the world. And if people want to learn about the approach, reach out to me or Ted or Shauna on that. I think the other, again, taking the step back is, in terms of the broader lessons, the success of EarthRanger and many of the other collaborations we mentioned at the beginning is because we basically have made that effort of building strong coalitions, and EarthRanger was successful not just because of the great, as Ted said, not just because of the great people and the resources that Paul Allen brought to the table, but the fact they catalyzed the coalition and got everyone focused on those shared needs. And as I said, that's one of many similar scalable multi-agency projects. And I think, again, from my experience in NetHope, there is a need for the broader NGO sector to think about how it can pivot from looking at solutions for individual sites or individual countries or individual agencies to think about how can technology transform the issues of the day and resolve the issues of the day. But I think that's our final slide, isn't it, Frederick? And I think we should go to Q&A, yeah?
All right, sounds great. We've got quite a few very interesting questions, and I may mix them up a little bit in terms of the order. But the first one that came in was what's needed to build the coalitions that you discussed? How do you make sure people are aligned and ready to share ideas, technologies, and data?
Yeah, wow. You work really hard. I think the first and foremost it has to start with is everyone in the room truly mission-driven. Whatever that mission is, and obviously we're focusing on wildlife conservation, but whatever that mission is everyone in the room genuinely focused on that. If there are some folks who just sort of paying it lip service, but their agenda is really getting some good PR because it's part of their CSR program, or it's really fundraising, or whatever it might be, and you need to be really honest and blunt and evaluate that in the room. And it's about building trust. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to to really know that the folks you're working with are trying to do, they may have different ideas about how to achieve the mission, but they're trying to achieve the same mission. And then you can have all the arguments and discussion about how best to achieve the mission and who's doing what best and all of that. But it has to be built on the mission and on those trusted relationships that get built.
Yeah, and I would add some things to that. It's these coalitions are successful for, as Ted said, the shared mission. They're successful typically because everyone checks their logos and egos at the door. That it's about working together, not for the sake of WCS or WWF or any other agency or for Vulcan. Our success is the impact we have, and so we check our logos and egos at the door. I think we have common principles of how we work. In other words, we agree on how we're going to work together, and we compromise. We understand this isn't about for example, with WCS working with Vulcan, we're not sitting there saying, well, we need the WCS tool. We understand we need a tool that works for everyone, and so we need to compromise on our requirements.
I like the word principles, Jonathan. I think that was good too.
Yeah, thanks, Ted.
There was another question that came in. It was should be easy to answer. An enthusiastic question. Say, how do we get the apps and apply it on our field site? It's exactly what I was looking for.
Well, we love hearing that. I think the simple answer is to email myself or Shauna. If it's somewhere in Africa, that's definitely me. If it's somewhere outside of Africa, email Shauna. And we will be happy to connect. And of course, we will look at it holistically. And if it feels like like SMART is a better fit, or SMART EarthRanger combination is the best fit, we'll work with Jonathan and the folks there to do that. So that's a pretty easy one.
Excellent. And as I said earlier, I posted all your email addresses in the chat window, and I'll make sure that that goes out with a follow-up email as well. Well, I'm going to skip ahead to one of the last questions that came in, because at NetHope, we're all about digital transformation these days, the use of technology in intervention. So the question is quite lengthy, but typically we find that international NGOs have a hard time fundraising for technology, and this may be slightly different for conservation. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of investing in digital versus on-the-ground tools like park rangers and vehicles? Are you seeing the need to trade one off versus the other, or do such investments complement each other?
Yeah, so I wish I had, seeing that question, I wish I had included a slide that I show every time I do a talk, which is, if all of you folks know the magic quadrant, or the four quadrants, the one side being, in this case, one side being capacity, management capacity, the other axis being technology capacity. And I think the first thing I always say is, if you don't have the boots on the ground, you don't have the community engagement, you don't have the infrastructure and the skills, you don't have a well-trained ranger team, you've got a hostile, community that's hostile to conservation, it doesn't matter what technology you put in there, you're not going to succeed. I think it's also important to realize smart is often the first best technology to bring in. It gets people thinking about data-driven management. It doesn't require, it doesn't initially require much infrastructure. In fact, it doesn't really require anything other than a computer to put smart on and be able to put the data in. Obviously, the more you have, if you have CyberTracker to collect the data digitally and all of that, but those things can be brought in incrementally. And then EarthRanger actually comes in after that, and it only starts to make sense when you have technology producing data. You have digital radios producing GPS coordinates. You have animals with collars. You have, whatever it might be. But there's this progression. So the answer to that is, I hate to think of it in terms of a trade-off. It's not a trade-off. It's build from what you need first to the more advanced stuff. I think EarthRanger will never be in all the sites as Smart is, and Smart unfortunately probably won't be in all the sites, all the particular sites, just because the management capacity isn't there in all of those. And there was one other question buried in that. Go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so I was on that side, the fundraising side. I worked for the U.S. government in Tanzania, and I saw firsthand, so different donors can provide different types of support. So I would say look at your landscape and kind of look at who can provide me what type of support right now, and where can I get started on this? And to Ted's point, that's absolutely the case, right? There's no point in putting a drone in the air if you have no one to respond to anything the drone's doing on the ground, right? But look at your landscape, look at who wants to invest in it, and kind of go from there, but definitely start with the capacity building. That would be the first place to start.
Absolutely. And then I would add one more thing, because I think it's really hard to fundraise for technology. That is absolutely not at all different in conservation to anything you might be working on. It is at least as hard. I can't imagine it being harder. This is actually one of the unique things that Vulcan brings, is because we can dedicate, 6, 7 engineers whose day job it is to build EarthRanger. That's really difficult. I mean, Jonathan can tell you, probably has lost, that's why he has that cap on, because he's lost all his hair trying to manage contractors building technology. It's really hard to do. It's hard to fundraise for technology. You have to find the right funder. Our founder was a technologist and so understood that. So it is really hard, especially when you're talking about developing new tools. I do think there are those folks out there, the smart parks folks, these 2 guys that started in the Netherlands. And then you get some groups, some companies like Cisco and Microsoft. Microsoft's AI for Earth program is a great example. Google has a similar program. You're starting to get some maturity, actually, from the technologists who want to help but didn't know how to, and didn't know how to given their organizational or philanthropic constraints. And I think there's some maturity happening there, but there's still a bit to go there.
Well, excellent. There's a couple last minute questions. I think we have room for one or two. One was, does Vulcan fund conservation and other interventions by international NGOs? And if so, what's the process to engage?
We do, and I mentioned a few as I was talking earlier. We definitely do fund. We've funded the Great Elephant Census. That was an $8 million project. We provided funding to 7 NGOs who were involved in helping us carry that project off. We've done research. We've funded research. I mentioned Sam Wasser. We've funded on-the-ground operations like the international wildlife trafficking. So we've actually funded across, and in the marine space, we've funded basic scientific research like on corals. We really fund across a whole range of things, and I think what you'll be seeing even more as we move into a sort of a new phase here is we'll be doing funding around some of our core core tools that we're building, like the Allen Coral Atlas, like EarthRanger, like some of the things that Sean is involved in. We'll be doing grants around that. How do you engage? We don't take unsolicited grants, but we do have a lot of folks we work with, and I think it's an understanding of what areas we're working in, and maybe just reaching out to us. I mean, Shauna and I and others get inquiries all the time, and we're really honest. Like that's not really something Vulcan would engage in, or gee, that sounds interesting and might align with some things we're doing, and we'd be happy to look at that. But there's no real formal process. We rarely do RFPs or RFIs. It's really, here are the areas we work in, and then through our networks, we have people reach out to us with potential interesting opportunities.
Well, super. Thank you very much. We are at the top of the hour, and Jonathan, since you kind of produced this session and asked for this to be taken on, any last-minute comments or observations here?
Well, obviously to thank NetHope for hosting this, to thank the attendees for taking the time. I know there'll be other people who are going to be listening to the recording of this, so thank you to those who listen to the recording afterwards. And most of all, thanks obviously to Shana and Ted for giving us this time, but also for delivering such an incredible product to our community.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, I want to thank all three of you. Again, this has been very eye-opening, and I think it goes well beyond conservation. This is something that we're passionate about at NetHope in terms of applying technologies and do it and extending the capabilities of those physical resources you have on the ground, as you mentioned, Ted. So thank you very much. Thanks to the audience for great interaction, and I wish everybody a great rest of your day. Please take a minute or so to answer the short webinar satisfaction poll when you exit. Take care, everyone. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.